Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out and spending the evening with us and group. My name is Emily Krupteski. I'm a site manager here at the Washington County Heritage Center. In the back there is Brent Peterson. He is our executive director, and we just want to welcome you all and thank you again for coming tonight. The Heritage Center is open Tuesday through Sunday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Only day we're closed is Monday, so come visit us anytime. Our next event will be the book release for Through the Lens of Walt Schaar, which is a photographic history of Bayport. It's a really, really exciting book. We're so excited to help launch this. It is going to be going on, the author is going to be doing signings at Bayport City Hall during Derby Days on Saturday, September 17th from 9 a.m. to noon. You can get your signed copies there for $25. We also have our fall membership meeting coming up on Thursday, September 22nd at the Stillwater Event Center, which is right next door. Before we get started, if you don't mind just silencing your cell phones, that would be appreciated. For all of you on Zoom, I think you're probably all on mute, but if you're not, go ahead and take a moment to check that and make sure you are. Just a quick introduction for our illustrious speaker here tonight. This is Reckinger. He grew up in South St. Paul and graduated in 1970. He married Nancy 50 years ago, and they raised their family in Cottage Grove. Their three sons and their families still live here in town. Herb worked at the Erickson Refinery in St. Paul Park for 38 years. During the 90s, he was on the Historic Courthouse Advisory Committee. He is a member of the South Washington Heritage Society and the Cottage Grove Advisory Committee for Historic Preservation and the Washington County History Network. So he's very involved here in our community. In the 80s, he wrote a book about his family's ancestors. In 2014, he became involved in a national effort to place at least one picture on a website for each of the 58,281 men and women who gave their lives in Vietnam and are named on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C. It's a really big accomplishment. This organization is the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund and the founders and keepers of the wall. He still spends his free time searching for better pictures. In January, Herb was offered a job in assisting the site managers for the traveling wall, nicknamed the Wall That Heals. Life has been good. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to him. Thank you again for coming. Here's Herb.
Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge Emily a little bit right off the bat here for the great job she did on the slides. And I'd also like to talk for just a little bit about a guy named Ken Marcus. He died in January. She'll fix that.
Yeah.
But he was a guy that could have been here tonight talking. He was a great guy. He loved the history of the county. He wrote a book about different crazy incidences in our county. He was a Civil War guy. We covered a lot of things at old cemeteries and stuff. He was a great guy. So we're going to miss him. So what I want to talk about today is what we have underfoot there. Okay, and that is the geology of Minnesota and Washington County. We have formations of bedrock. Most of the bedrocks that if you blew away all the dirt around here and got to bedrock, most of those bedrocks would be about 500 million years old. So to give you a little perspective of that. This is 1 year, you put them in a line. I tried to do it within our county, and I almost didn't do it. It wasn't almost long enough. You would have to drive from my house in Cottage Grove to downtown Forest Lake with a piece of paper all the way, one piece of paper for each year. So we're down here, and the rest of it is about 31 and a half miles. That's driving miles, that's not crow flight. And then after the geology, we'll talk about the ice age that started like a little over 2 million years ago, when they affected so much of our landscape, and the geology that had already been laid down by the formation of bedrock. And then at the end here, we'll talk about the modern maps and the geography of our last 170 years here. That's all very interesting too. So the first four slides here were taken from, to me, the greatest vantage point of South Washington County. It's not in our county, it's in Dakota County. It's in Charred when you look out across and see all this great stuff. For you people too, maybe most of you are from Stillwater. Maybe your greatest vantage point was across the river. I'll never forget how great that looked coming over in the car, you know, in those days. I biked it twice and I was too tired at the top to turn around. So anyway, I don't see it like that, but I just saw what a spectacular view. Sometimes your best vantage point isn't right in the middle of where you want to see it. So this first one shows, this is a Schaar's Bluff overlook. It's a big knob in the bluff line. And this is looking upriver. This is what they call Spring Lake. The Lackawanna Dam reclaimed a lot of that, but there was a time, and I can show you the old map here, where you could, this landmass went all the way here. There was a little dam here, a small little dam, and you could take your car in the early 1900s, before the Lackawanna Dam in 1930, and you could drive all the way along this little road here that you can't see anymore, all the way up by Coke Refinery. That is Coke Refinery. This looks a lot worse. This little rise here looks a lot worse when you're down there. I hike at the Great Cloud Dunes SNA, but that is a landfill. If you ever need a good excuse for recycling, just drive past that. And this is going to the left. Great Cloud Island is here. You can see the lower island sand quarry. And I took this picture at a good time. Here's a dredge. You can see a crane out here. And the dredging is almost continual in there, trying to keep that channel at 9 feet. So I'll show you a little bit more with the rest of these 4 slides. This is like right from the left, or the right side of that last photo, and starting here, took a picture. Here's a into here. This is Lower Great Cloud Island. This is a channel here that aggregate industries uses to get to the quarries, the sand quarries. This is a river channel here, so the barges go right up. So this is the channel here. Okay, and then in the 4th photo, this is the 3rd photo. This is a modern wing dam. Okay, and we'll talk about wing dams, the ancient ones, when they tried to change the path of the river and make it deeper. But this here is being created. They're trying to take an island. The barges have to come down when it gets off of Lower Great Cloud, just to take almost a 90-degree turn, and then another one up here, and then head for the Lackawanna Dam. If they eliminate this, a lot of that would be alleviated. So I think this structure is put in there, and the water will help carve this out ahead of time, because when they start dredging, it's going to take a while. So this last photo was taken, Glennie, you know what Camel's Hump is. Anybody else know? It's in Cottage Grove. It's a Mississippi Valley site. Most of Cottage Grove is on a terrace of the Mississippi, but this is Highway 61, 80th Street exit is down here. There's a spot up here on the bluff called Camel's Hump. The city turned that into a viewpoint area. It's wonderful. So you can see, here's Coke Refinery. There's a landfill again, but this is from many miles away. Schaar's Bluff is over here somewhere. And there's the tanks for the crude oil, the refinery used to bring in. But anyway, you can see the curvature of the valley here. It's coming down north. And on their side of the river, they call it Pine Bend. On our side, we call it Great Cloud. But the river takes almost literally a 90-degree turn as it turns and heads towards Hastings. We'll also find out why we don't have dinosaur fossils in Minnesota and why Montana does. We'll find out why agates are here. They shouldn't be. We'll find out why limestone is primarily the top layer of our bedrock. Okay, so I'm going to do another slide here. This is a story of the bedrock in our area. And most of our surface bedrock is Prairie du Chien bedrock. Well, that is a Jordan sandstone. Everybody's heard of the Jordan aquifer. See how close that is. This is where our water comes from. Water doesn't communicate well through limestone, but it can carve out sandstone quite easily. And then you have the St. Peter above that, and then the Platteville, which is hard to see. You can see that in St. Paul at times. You can see it if you're on 35E, you cross the Mississippi River. Up on the right, you can see some of the Platteville limestone up there. But that's newer. But anyway, our bedrocks here, they're all right around 500 million years old. That's when most were laid down. These are much older. Outside in St. Peter. I think water is in the St. Peter in certain places, but we're not high enough for that. Okay, so now we're going to explain. I'm going to go to this here. I made this, I copied this off of a tiny little map. Where I find out how to blow it up for me. But anyway, I drew this. And it's underneath the Dakota Bridge. It's looking from south to north. I put the Minnesota River in here. I can put in the waves. So you can see what a small part of that bridge that the river's in. Okay, and here are the bedrocks on it. Okay, there's a little bit of plateau at the top of St. Peter, and the feeder in here, 150 feet of St. Peter, and probably well over 100 feet of alluvium. What's alluvium? That's the things that the river brings down. Okay, and it's soft stuff. It's not bedrock. It's everything but bedrock. It's what alluvium is. You can see the Prairie du Chien, 160 feet of that, 60 feet of Jordan sandstone. The St. Lawrence Formation, 220. It's all 450 million years old and older. So what happens here after a glacier? After a glacier meltwater quits, you got water like you've got flowing today. And this Mississippi, we got, it's like a little tiny creek compared to what was in it when this got carved out. So that's what happens. It can't carry the sediment away as well, or at all. So anyway, that's why this all builds up. When this Minnesota River started, it was down here somewhere. And this builds up, this alluvium builds up, averages an eighth of an inch a year that it builds up. You add that up over 10,000 years, you can get a lot of feed there. And if anybody has questions, ask now. Well, it's still in mind. If I can answer that.
Sure, I have a question. I see a very thin section that's labeled N Richmond number. Is that New Richmond? Higher up in the Prairie du Chien, it's cutting the Prairie du Chien section.
Okay.
Up right there.
Yeah, Willow River. I would say, okay, the Willow River, that cuts through bedrock. And they always name these after a place where they were located and identified. But it's not, that rock is laid down the same, and I'll get into that right now. But that's, normally they'll take it with that, like Prairie du Chien is a town, Platteville is a town. Almost any one of them are towns, even though, I don't know how you say that, I know there's one of them in New York State, but there could be one a lot closer. So, we talk about limestone, we talk about sandstone. That's what was laid down where we are. So here's what lays down limestone, shallow ocean. That's why we don't have dinosaur fossils here. We were covered with shallow oceans. Montana and them, they were high and dry. So we were underwater during the dinosaur age. Sandstone, that's caused by shoreline, ocean shoreline. Grinds that stuff up, turns it into sand. So I'm going to do this right now. I'm going to put down the mic and the stick. I'm going to try to keep this clean, because I told Emily.
Oh boy.
Here's how soft sandstone. Here's two pieces. See the mess I made? If I did this for a half minute, it'd be all sand. You said you got that.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, that's sandstone for you. So that's why, we'll get to these other maps in a bit. That's why you won't find sandstone very often as your top bedrock, because it just, when the water flows over, it wears it so quickly, so fast. Yeah, you get the occasional shale areas up here. Like here's a shale, fossils are here. You can see shale, it's like, it's more like swampy areas in between the approaching ocean, you know, the shallow oceans and stuff. But the great finding fossils in that stuff. The best places where the old St. Paul Brick Company used to be, just south of St. Paul's High Bridge. And we had a collapse there. That's been 9 years already when 2 kids got killed. And a landslide there. and it's still roped off. You still don't know what to do with it, but that's where you could find it. It'll just flake off. You could find it all the way down the bluff. Okay, so here's what happens that I've been able to observe. I go on canoe trips and stuff, and I soon came to realize in the body waters, the rocks allow the rivers to go here and there. When they fill up, they'll run off. They don't wear them rocks up, but here they do. That's why our geology down here is so different from northern Minnesota. And most of our bedrock is these different layers here. Probably the nearest area where it changes is up by Taylor's Falls. And there they have the volcanic thing that blew out all that limestone and sandstone. Yeah, that's meltwater. That's where Lake Superior first melted. Okay, it came down that valley, and it was strong enough to carve out that volcanic basalt rock. So at the University of Minnesota, anybody know how wide the river valley is there? Any idea?
300 feet.
Right. Oh, how much wider than the river? It's not much. They call that a gorge, most of it, right? How wide is it at the St. Paul Airport? About 2 miles. It can be anywhere from 2 to 5 miles wide, the Mississippi Valley, below Fort Snelling. And how did that happen? I drew that here. Our most recent glacial ice age. A lot of people, a lot of knowledgeable people feel like this could have been the biggest freshwater flow on Earth ever. Okay, so when glaciers come down, they don't come down on a broad plain like this. They come down in lows. They overlap each other. That makes it hard for people to discern at times, these experts, because they overlay each other. They carve out valleys, they carve out new valleys, they extinguish, they fill up old valleys and stuff. So we've got a lot of ancient cuts of valleys right through the Twin Cities. Anyway, Glacial Lake Agassiz, I drew this too. Here's the state of Minnesota, and this is how big it was, not at one time, but over all the periods of melting. So, where Minnesota bulges out, that's called Browns Valley. Okay, so the glacier ended there. And when it comes down, it's like a fist pushing sand through a sandbox. It creates its own berm. That's called terminal moraine. Okay, so that moraine can exist there until the water gets high enough to go over it. This water had to wait until Hudson Bay and everything got melted because it's north. The Red River of the North is in that valley. That flows north. That's where it goes. The waters go today. But in this day, 10,000 years ago, it built up so high. Finally, it came out, blew through Browns Valley, blew out to Minnesota Valley, and met here. And you go anywhere down the Mississippi, Winona and stuff, it's not a gorge. It's a big valley. Okay, and you can see it covers a tiny bit of South Dakota, a quarter or so of North Dakota, and massive acres of square miles of Manitoba. Anybody ever heard of the driftless area? It's in southeastern Minnesota, it's in parts of Wisconsin, it's in parts of Iowa and Illinois. And it's an area. And this proves how these lobes took place. These lobes never got in there. So what do they have? They don't have any lakes, but they don't have any mosquitoes, and you got nice little river and creek valleys. Okay. Let's see what we have next. We're getting to the good stuff. So these glaciers, I've been told that 10,000 years ago, there was 1 mile to 2 miles of ice above my house. Where is it now? They say the glaciers are melting in Glacier National Park. We're in a warming cycle. It started longer than 10,000 years ago. It takes 1 million years for a glacier. So yeah, we're still warming. There's many buried river paths, I told you, in the Twin Cities. And the Mississippi, when it turns at Fort Snelling and goes up to the Lafayette Bridge, that's new. The other ones existed before that. If you drive in on Warner Road, that bluff goes off to the right. You keep curving this way. That's an ancient valley. So that was already. And the other one It took off from Fort Snelling and came down to Pine Bend. We will beautifully illustrate that here. So if you want to see this one, what I'm talking about, at the Lafayette Bridge, so that when that water came out of Fort Snelling and came up the new channel, new 10,000 years ago, when that dropped there, it dropped because that other valley already existed. That was the greatest, maybe the greatest waterfall that man has ever been able to know about. And when you go to the Science Museum of Minnesota, you go into the displays, go off to the left. And I do it every time, just like the 4 and 5. It's a big board, you can turn this thing, and it shows that waterfall right about where the Lafayette Bridge is. Okay, so I know people worry about Lake Pepin. Oh, it's still in it. You know where Lake Pepin started? St. Paul Airport. That's how much that thing is filled in. You got a valley that can't get rid of all its sediment. Most of the sediment in the Mississippi comes from the Minnesota River, illustrated by the lock and dams. Look at the lock and dams before, look at the Ford lock and dam. The water goes over the top. You would never do that at the Hastings lock and dam, the Reckinger, or any of the other ones, because you got to keep that sediment moving. Okay? You would, they did that in Lake Bilsby. They had a dam there and they let it go too quick. The sediments to do some repair, kill every fish in that river and change the course of the Vermilion down by the Mississippi. Gotta be very careful with that. Okay. Okay, so now you can look over there at this same map, or you can look up here. It's much easier. I'll point to this one. But this is the Bedrock Geology. This is Prairie du Chien. So that's limestone. This is it's our aquifer, Jordan Aquifer. And this is the next one down. It's a green one. That is called the that's the St. Lawrence Formation. So very interesting. If you look on the other map, you can see that this starts here. This cut in the bedrock. That starts at Lake Elmo and comes down here. Well, the ground there too is in most places also a valley. So I'll go to the next slide. This slide looks a little bit the same, but this slide shows depth to bedrock. And when they show white, there's either bedrock's either right there or it's less than 50 feet. Okay. So remember I told you about the valley that came from Fort Snelling to Great Cloud Island. There's the evidence of it. You see that depth there? Here's the lower island. Look at the depth there. That depth there is over 300 feet to bedrock. Okay. Here's the lower island. Here's the upper island. What's the depth of bedrock there? And not because they've been carving it up for years before they ever started carving it up for limestone. Okay, very little depth of bedrock. So this was twice carved, and you can just see they put these maps right where the Dakota County border. So this is out in the river, but it's just like you severed a line, and then the new channel in the Mississippi comes down and goes into here. And that's why in our town down there, in our county. That's why the Mississippi takes this right turn, because it came in this way. And I think this actually came in into where the Vermilion is, the Vermilion Valley of today. Awesome stuff. Okay.
Where is Schaar's Bluff on this picture?
Schaar's Bluff is right here. No, right here. Here's a lower island right here. I can see the outline. So when you think about, is that 7 there? Whoa. Sorry, right.
You're good.
Okay, so this starts at Lake Elmo. This cut here. What caused that? Yeah, the glacier caused it, but it's called the glacial tunnel valley. And glaciers, when they melted, you know, they came forward. They got added onto it. The snow compressed the ice, you know, all that stuff. But when they were done, when they hit the terminal marine, they just melted. They didn't start pulling back, but they started melting. But they melted in other places too. and they could melt miles back. That's what happened here.
We
So
can
that,
back up and show that Lake Elmo slide, there's the next one back.
what do you want to see there?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, you can see the same thing here. And if you look on either of these two maps, these are the whole maps. This is Lake Elmo. You can see a figure of it went towards Stillwater. And you can see those same, look at that Stillwater one here, which is a great cut. That's a real deep. So there's places here, like this here. That bright one there, that's over 350 feet. So it's probably 400 or more feet depth of bedrock. By Great Cloud and pretty close. You got some spots up here north of Stillwater.
Was that channel go north of what's shown on the map there? Or was that kind of where it started?
It started, okay, so let's say you got a little pothole in a glacier. A glacier gets a crack in it, so the water starts seeping. More water will go in there and start carving. And of course, when it quits running, it's carrying a lot of sediment stuff. That sediment's gonna go down and slow up. It might fill that up. Like that Woodbury. They don't have much. They don't have the great stuff we have. It went through Woodbury, but it pretty much was level there. We got the good stuff. We got the Ravine Lake and all that. So let's go back a second to this great waterfalls at Lafayette Bridge. It's not there today. Where is it? St. Anthony Falls, yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So it also, when it got past the first bend in St. Paul, Minneapolis, there by the Minnehaha Park, then the Minnehaha Falls had to start dropping into Mississippi, and that's how much that's receded. So they figured that over the last 10,000 years, it receded an average of 4 feet a year that it receded up. So it doesn't really erode the limestone. The limestone is at the top, but it doesn't really erode it. What it does is you see it in waterfalls underneath where it's got a big bowl back there, you can walk behind it. That's where the sandstone was, carve that stuff up. And then you get a big enough of it goes up, then a chunk falls eventually. And of course, they arrested that. The rebrushing up St. Anthony Falls, you know, Minneapolis people did the 1800s to keep using that. If it would have receded another, I think another 200 feet, it would have extinguished itself and gone up to like Coon Rapids before you hit Bedrock. So now we'll move on to modern times in the last 150 years. So you know what floodplain is? River bottoms and floodplain are the same thing. What's the deepest place? What's the highest piece of ground in river bottoms? On the shores of the river. You go down a river, like the Mississippi, and it'll be high, and then you get into the floodplain. So I tell you about that 1/8 of an inch a year. What happens is the heaviest sediments are going to drop out first. Okay? And that's your sand and stuff. Then your silt goes over. And you know, farmers for ages, up until some of these great floods like 1965 and that, they've tried to farm them river bottoms, and they're really taking a chance because they can get flooded any time of year. So, okay, Katrina, New Orleans, why didn't it flood the French Quarter? It was a French Quarter, yes. It's a riverbank on a bigger scale than up here. You know, the river itself is 2 miles wide. What are we here? 3/8 of a mile wide in Mississippi, you know. But that's why the French Quarter never got flooded. So I'm going to talk about a guy who's not a former president. His name is William Buchanan Eads. Anybody ever seen the Eads Bridge in St. Louis? It's that old beat up bridge just north of the Arch. Okay, that's the Eads Bridge. Eads had designed that bridge in the 1860s, but decades before that. He did a lot of stuff for the Mississippi for navigation and stuff. And he developed diving belts to try and salvage ships and stuff. But he always wondered, what's it like down there? He kind of had an idea. And he was down around New Orleans and got in one of these big belts where the air came in one hole, breathing the wall together. He went down and he got to the bottom. And he realized This isn't the bottom, but it was kind of solid. He went down another 3 feet. He's up to here, and he hits solid bottom. There's 3 feet of eternal sand moving out to the bottom. Cool, huh? Okay. Now I'll go to the next slide here. So this was taken in the 40s. And you can see this is them island figures that we were looking at in the very first picture. We had that big gap in its water here. I told you that it used to be a road. Here you can see how the river erodes this. And if you ever see, I don't know if this is clouds or what, but if you look at some of these islands and stuff, even nowadays, sometimes you'll see it's not as dark as here off the tip of the island. That's sand and stuff coming off of that. And you know, the river still is fighting just to take that stuff. Send it down the river and make more silt and sand. So what happened? So the Hastings Lock and Dam, most of them went in the 1930s. So we'll go to this map here. This is a man-made map, not a picture. It's the same thing. Here's Schaar's Bluff. Lower Gray Cloud, Upper Gray Cloud. In 1895, the Mississippi River Commission wanted to change the Mississippi from 4 feet depth in low water to 6 feet without lock and dams. It hadn't been tried yet. So what they were basically doing was removing snags and rocks and putting in more wing dams. And you can look at that. I have the map displayed here. And here's a little piece of it here. These guys went across every 1/8 of a mile and measured the depth. When they got to the deepest one, like here and here, then later they'd go down the river and ascertain the channel. So you can see the river is making a big arc here. Here's a wing dam, here's a wing dam, here's a wing dams are on the inside of a bend. The river's flowing this way, but the wing dams would go here. They're trying to force the river out this way to keep more of the water here. I have a picture. Right here, you can even pass it around. But I'll just talk about it a little bit. You can see the wing dams here, and you can see that already behind them, dirt and stuff is, and silt and sand are settling in there. This is at Pine Coulee. It's down by Erickson Marine. And they were giving these out at the state fair. The guy had a whole book of these. His name was William Bossy. But I took a picture of our dog in the same scene, and you will see that's Schaar's Bluff and that's Schaar's Bluff. Railroad tracks are here. There's the railroad tracks right there. Okay. But there was like 2 or 3 islands that were totally submerged when they put in the lock and dam. And pass it around. Totally submerged. And what they did is they went in there ahead of time, cut down all the trees, and today, don't get out of the channel down there, you can still hit stumps in low water. So you can see these guys did what modern satellites can't even do for geologic survey maps. They walk this stuff. You know, geologic survey, if there's a road down there and it's tree covered, they don't know it. Satellite doesn't know it. People down below don't know it. These guys were the best. And they did these are all lakes today, down by Great Cloud. If anybody's never driven down the Great Cloud, go down there sometime. It's a great part of the county. And you go across the river and look at it. Sharp ball. So I got a little bit more here. So this is a modern map. And here's Spring Lake Reserve. So where I took those pictures for from was right about here. And you can see that. You saw this big thing here that looks like it might be the river. This is a river here. But here's the channel like where they go and do their sand quarry. It's supposed to become a state park at Lower Island. It's a 3 mile long. And I told you it's just a glorified sandbar. So that's a sandbar of 10,000 years. You know a little sandbar when you go fishing? That's a sandbar on a little different scale.
How long before they're going to have that quarried out?
They thought by 2030, now they're talking about excavating off this end of the land. To the south. Originally, they looked at river dredge and it had to stay in the valley. But I don't know if it's cleaned itself up. I don't know how, but they use it for things. You know, can you imagine how many homes that thing helped build, roads, everything, and the upper end with its limestone. But we're going to end this talk when we get to that. So there's 29 lock and dams. If you count St. Anthony down to just above St. Louis. Okay, 29 of them. And the river levels out here, they try to keep us in the pool from Hastings to the St. Paul Ford Lock and Dam. They try to keep that at 687 feet above sea level. And then from Hastings to Red Wing, which means you guys too, up here in Stillwater, that's 675 feet above sea level. They try to keep that not at St. Paul, not at Hastings, in the middle of the channel. In the middle of it. Because even though, you know, in the old days without the lock and dams, the river went like this. Well, even today, only in times where there's a drought or something, the river still has slope to it. Okay? And when they're in a flood, they just take them gates out at Hastings and everywhere else, and it flows like it used to. But it still has slope. And sometimes in high water, it can be up against the Hastings Dam, it can be 4 or 5 feet higher up in St. Paul. So you get down to about 300 feet above sea level at St. Louis. You still got 300 more feet before you get to the Gulf. How many lock and dams are there below St. Louis?
None.
None. Yeah, you don't need it. The Ohio and Missouri come in, makes it big enough, wide enough. They never need it. We only do things that we need. And there's only one place where they do have it's called the Chain of Rocks at Granite City. I don't know if that's in Illinois or what, but at that place, it can get turbulent and stuff because it gets shallow, you know, must be close to 9 feet, but it can get really turbulent because there's rocks there out in the main river. There's our modern map. Okay, now, here's where we're going to end it. What are those? What
You still border.
yeah, where do those come from?
Great one.
Yeah, where the little ones come from? We put them together right on the West Shore. But the big ones were built. Like Gray Cloud. So what did Gray Cloud have to offer? We'll go to it here. Oh. Okay, wait a minute.
That's okay. You're doing good.
What do you do? Oh,
You wanna go back?
hey, I got great. I did not do that. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So here's where the lower island is. They had to create a 20-acre site of class 5 gravel. Because that's this is all sand for all this to make these things. Okay. And they made a 200-foot long aluminum, corrugated aluminum building. Where do you think they got the class 5 gravel from? Upper Gray Cloud. They drove around Upper Gray Cloud, came in, built this, it was 6 to 12 inches thick, the pad. And they, in that building, they had rails on it. Those pieces that we saw were all on rails. And they were getting constructed. And the building is gone. The building itself is gone. It sat up in here somewhere. They tore the building down. I don't know why. Keep a nice building. But that was the first time, maybe the last time, that I've seen barges on the St. Croix since they closed coal barging to the Kingsland. How long has that been? 30, 40 years or more? All that. Yeah. It's been a long time, you know. Doing a good thing, and they would cure them in this building. That's why it's 200 feet long, because they could make them summer or winter. And by the time they got to the end of the building, then they could take them out. But it was massive equipment that it took to do that. So now, my talk is about over with, but I'm just going to point out a few of the great books and literature out there. Two Henrys. Henry Lewis here. They're both Germans by some coincidence, but they did beautiful portraits. And Lewis did pictures. This is St. Peter's River Valley. What's St. Peter's River today? Minnesota River. Yeah. So he's got all these, he's got over by us there, Medicine Bottles Village, but I think it was Lenny, I think the portrait he did is when he's in on Medicine Bottle Village was in Pine Bend, not on the lower island. Here's the other thing. He's the guy that did that portrait there, but this is full of them from St. Louis up to here, and it is wonderful. Minnesota Historical Society published this. Views on the Mississippi, Henry Moss. This is pretty interesting. This is two pictures. This is a spiral bridge in Hastings. There's a couple of steamboats in front of it. This is there's a wing of an airplane, a biplane. And this is when they were constructing the Red Wing Lock Dam. It's some miles north of Red Wing by the Prairie Island power plant. But they cut this through, but the river channel went this way.
Do you mind holding it up for the Zoom? Oh, just there you go.
You got it enough?
Perfect. Thank
So,
you.
trying to show everybody. So they made this a lock and dam route, and the barges go through here. And they had to put in a closing dam across there. Otherwise that would stay in Mississippi. Okay. So if you see this island here, because the river channel went here and before this, it's Wisconsin. It's one of the only places that we own. It's all on our side of the river. That's all Diamond Island is Wisconsin. We stole something from. Can't steal something. Steal an island. Oops, that hurt. Okay. And here's a guy, Greg Brick. He's written about 4 or 5 books about caves and stuff. He goes through any cave he can get into. He doesn't care if they're roped off or whatever. And he's come out of them soaking in green stuff or blue stuff. He lives somehow, but they're wonderful. This is the best of it. It's called Subterranean Twin Cities.
Who published that?
That was Minnesota, University of Minnesota Press. Yeah, you can find it. Here's the best 2 books on Minnesota geology. Edmund Bray wrote this, Billions of Years in Minnesota. Wonderful diagrams. There's diagrams of moraine after a glacier pulls back. There's a glacier starting to go back, creating a lake. It's all spelled out. It's hard to find. Richard Congress and Charles Nash, I think is the best one. You can still find this pretty easy on 8 books at Amazon. Minnesota Geology, Richard Congress and Charles Nash, University of Minnesota at Duluth University, geology professors. Interesting. We used to teach this in high school. This was being taught at Brady High School in the early 70s when my brother got there. Schwartz and Teals, Minnesota's Rocks and Waters. Another great book.
That's a great book I read a long time ago. And the thing about it is that was before tectonic plates were recognized.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to hear that guy trying to explain what's going on without knowing about plates.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, but it's a great book.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I read it back then, but I didn't know a single thing. You're gonna have to do. Here's a really, I don't like this. This is probably the best one though. It's called P.K. Sims and G.P. Morey, Geology of Minnesota, Centennial one. But it's very scholarly. This is a good kind of a newer book about Lake Agassiz. That's a big, it's pretty good. It's very recent. This is a book by Sue Lee called The Life of Newton Horace Winchell. He's the father of geology of Minnesota. This is published by the University of Minnesota Press. It's a year or 2 old. I just read it in the last year. And here, this lady here wrote, she's got a couple of books out. Her name is Sandstone, Constance Sandstone. But just a real nice book about, you can go to all these different parts of Minnesota. Pick a place, she'll tell you how to get there and stuff and what to see. Just explain it, she's wonderful. And then these 2 are all right. They just kind of show old valleys in the Midwest mostly. And this one does old valleys in Minnesota. And the Twin Cities ones are great. Like the St. Croix one time came down where Phelan and Como. A lot of interesting stuff. So, any questions? And anybody can come up here and look when we're done here. Oh, I didn't show you the rocks. This is Dakota shell. It has got brachiopods and shells plastered on both sides of it. There's a cephalopod. It's a paper creature here. You can see a little vertebrae here on the end. There's a trilobite. I bought this. The rest of it, everything else you see here, I found. This is limestone from Gray Cloud. I am very ashamed. Beautiful agate. How did agates get here? I didn't explain that. The glaciers either carried them down or their meltwaters brought them here. It's the only way they got here. Another great agate. They're not all banded the same. Here is the biggest agate I ever found. Found it at the refinery when I was fire watching one time. And a little bit of that wouldn't have been shown. I'd have just walked right past it. Just another dirty rock. There's another rock. This is it gets kind of shale. It's right between a shale and a limestone here or there. And you'll see a lot of shells on that. And then the plant, like there's a Y-shaped. I just brought this around. This is Jasper and Hematite out of the Tower Sudan mine. Just to show you how different our bedrocks are. These are all sedimentary, and these ones. I'm not even going to touch that sandstone. Any questions, anybody? Yeah.
What type of rock is it, that agate? Is it igneous or metamorphic?
It's igneous. It's a bubble in a volcano. Okay, they're kind of round, and then when they cool, that's how they get distorted. But very seldom. I don't know what this would have looked like. It would have been a whole egg. But I imagine that they can warp. They could probably become two bubbles. You know, by the time you become a rock. And here's the best Vegas. You'll see the red banded with the white quartz lines. You know, they make the produce. And this has just like one big white quartz line. It's kind of pretty unique. But that's what they are. They're volcanic.
The granite from like the St. Cloud area?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
That's metamorphic, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know about how it forms and stuff. But I know they make a lot of good banks. Yeah, it's good, durable. You know, you can make, like the old bridge in St. Paul Park, the old rail bridge, the car bridge. This is what the bridge sat on. I don't know why that stuff didn't wear out. They'd use sandstone or would wore out. Anybody else?
What's the red line on this map?
Which line?
Well, all the red,
Oh, those are just, that's a Google map or something maybe. Or anyway, and they're just denoting like the lake, the Mississippi and stuff. And I do have to tell you, these pictures, those photographs there, there's a website for Mahapo. Okay, and I got cards up here when you're done. If you take a card I have, I got my email and my phone number on it. I'll give you the websites so you can call this up, and it's really neat. Where I walk, they start at our end of the county. The earliest ones are 1940, so you can look back that far. Nobody was flying till the 20s around here, but there are a few from the 30s. And then Mahapo is Minnesota, University of Minnesota aerial photograph, something. It's wonderful. And I'll give you the direct link to that. I'll get my emails or just email. The other website I can give you is this Mississippi River Commission map, and you can look at any one of them. And see the map sits this way, but that's north. I get this one over here, I'm using it to hold these up. And that is upside down. But there's a St. Croix. And that's Prescott and Point Douglas stuff upside down. Any more questions?
Did you say that the St. Croix was carved out from the Lake Superior melt?
The melt of Lake Superior, almost down the path that you know, like Solon Springs where the St. Croix starts, and then the Brule River. A lot of old timers will tell you when the water gets, the spring gets high enough, It'll flow out of that lake, out of Sloan Springs, and go both ways. The Blue goes into Lake Superior, but that was the path of it, the glacial path, no path, Lake Superior, until St. Lawrence Seaway.
But it did the carving, just like Agassiz did in
Yeah.
the western part of the state.
You know, you had a low, you get to Mille Lacs Lake, there's a big bend, and terminal marine, that could be a mile or two west, but there's a terminal marine at the south end of Mille Lacs. Mille Lacs was a lobe ended there. There's two beaches, if you know where to look when you're going out 94 in western Minnesota, there's two beaches of Lake Agassiz on the freeway. And one of them's really easy, you can tell. You go there and you look both ways, it just goes for mile. Lenny, what we, pardon?
Where's that?
In western Minnesota, I don't know, around Detroit Lakes or something. Get one of these good geology books. Lenny?
There's a couple things. There's the remains of a glacier that you can still see near Painesville, Minnesota.
Okay,
It's just a big bluff that comes down right by the road, which is kind of interesting.
okay.
The other thing is Friends of the Mississippi River and McAllister College are doing a study whether the locks and dams should be removed.
Oh, I know.
They're talking about that. I went on a boat tour this summer up to the lock and dam in St. Anthony. And they're just wanting people's input on it. The Friends of the Mississippi will come and talk to groups about it. So, you know, this is a long
Yeah.
ways away, but
I think
interesting.
the kayakers might eventually get tired. So, anybody else? You can come up here and look around if you want to take a card, if you want those web addresses for those, they're both easy sites to get on, but this one has about 2 lines to it. So if I wrote it down, you'd still be right. And like driving up to Forest Lake. Okay, so thanks everybody.
A quick shot of your table here. Yeah.
Want a card here?
Yes. The aerial,
Okay, that's my other. Yeah.
okay, does this have that website?
No.
No.
So,
I thought it started at 7.